What's up, bikers? I'm Robert, and this is the B1KER Bar Podcast live stream episode 115. Thanks for tuning in tonight. I really appreciate all of you out there. Tonight's guest is Fasst Co. That's F-A-S-S-T. That means they're really fast. If you haven't heard of them, they've been in the moto industry for a while and kind of breaking into the MTB stuff. But before that, let's go ahead and get started with the normal beginning of the show. You know, like where you hit fast forward on your podcast app. But see, I don't do it in a certain amount of time. So you're never going to know exactly how much time I'm going to talk about you following me on Instagram or Facebook. That would do me a big favor if you guys did that. Like seeing those numbers rise. So it helps me keep motivated. I did log in to the Apple Podcast reviews just the other day to see if somebody got one in February, and somebody did. I really appreciate you taking the time to go out there and write a review about the podcast. If you guys want to be the next person that I'm thanking, I wish I should have wrote down their name. You think I'd be better prepared for this, but you know what? It's like another day or two left in February. And you could be the first person to do it in March. By the time you're listening to it, you could be writing a 5-star review about the B1KER Bar Podcast. That'd make me stoked. Helps the podcast do better. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening on YouTube, hit subscribe, man. Those numbers, they help as well. So every little bit helps. If you hit thumbs up, makes the algorithm think that this doesn't suck, and then more people can come enjoy the show. And then I keep doing it, because if nobody's liking it, nobody's subscribing, I'm assuming it's not doing well. And then I stop, right? Just go back to sitting on my couch, drinking beer by myself again. Enjoying Sundays that way. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and bring today's guest back on for the first time for you guys. Hey, how's it going, Jason?
Not too bad. How are you?
Oh, man, just living the dream, right?
Yeah, heck yeah. I appreciate you having me on.
What's that?
I appreciate you having me on.
Oh yeah, dude, totally. It's always fun to get somebody else out here and talk to them, and it's interesting to see where companies come from, how they got there. And I always tell people whenever I'm kind of pitching the show to them, it really helps kind of humanize your business. Like instead of somebody thinking that it's just some dude over there with a suit on, just signing checks and making money. Like it's really people that are putting food on the table,
Yeah, exactly. I'm passionate about the sport, passionate about what we're doing. And yeah. It's crazy, man. The amount of people that just think we're driving BMWs and just cashing checks is wild.
Right.
It couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, and everybody thinks that the businesses are a lot bigger too. I mean, from what I've noticed, even companies that are, let's just say bigger names in mountain biking, they're still pretty small. Unless you're specialized or, you know what I mean? One of these huge companies, there's not a lot of people behind the scenes making it happen.
Yeah, it's surprising, especially in this day and age, man. There's a lot of companies doing more with less. That's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. You stopped your sentence before I got my beer down my throat there. I was like, oh wait, panicking. So where are you guys located at?
So we're technically in Washington, Utah, right next to St. George. So yeah, we've got really good trails at our leisure here, and trails right from the shop. And yeah, it's a cool area. It's a really good area for the business.
Yeah. How long? And so if I remember correctly, when I looked at the website, you guys have been around since 99 or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So they started the company in 1998. It was a college project, and man, one thing led to another, and yeah, it's been a wild ride. I came on board in 2011, late 2011, early 2012.
Right.
And just as a moto athlete. And yeah, it's been a wild ride, man. It's been cool to see the business grow. And yeah, it's pretty rad. And with a small business like this, a small company, everybody, we always say that we wear a lot of hats, right? There's no, oh, that's not my job. You'll never hear anybody around here say that, and it's the passion that you have in a small business like that is rad. It's something that you don't see everywhere,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I think that's that makes it fun though too, right?
Totally.
So you were saying it was a college project. Can you explain that a little more?
Yeah. So
my college projects were like, how many beers can I drink in the next 4 hours?
Oh, no kidding. Yeah. So the guys that own the company, Chris and Cole, they're like childhood friends, and they've grown up riding motorcycles together pretty much their whole lives. Uh-huh. And yeah, they were seniors at Cal State Long Beach, and they created. So Cole is kind of like the product development guy. He's more like the moto racer, and then Chris is more like the business mind. He's more the nuts and bolts, ties everything together. But nonetheless, they grew up racing together, their whole lives. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, they were just going to school together. They were friends. Chris actually was working at Mid-Cities Honda at that point, and just a parts guy behind the counter. And long story long, it was a senior project at Cal State Long Beach, and they started with a spoke torque wrench. And I don't know if you've ever seen it, but basically what it is it's just a quick, easy way to check your spoke torque on motorcycles. And back in those days, at that point, like some of those parts on the motorcycles were mass manufactured. And so the tolerances weren't really good, and they worked, but didn't work well, And so at that point, Cole and his dad had some machine, like a lathe and stuff in their garage. And so pretty much at that point, they were just making parts that were solving issues on their own motorcycles.
Right. They're just like, hey, let's go out there, and like somebody would do with the 3D printer right now. They're like,
exactly. Like one of the big ones that they made was like a brake clevis that just had tighter tolerances, so it wasn't so sloppy. But the actual project that they did that started the company was that spoke torque wrench, and it's pretty crazy to see the just the ebb and flow of that thing, and the amount of mechanics that use it. And yeah, it's a pretty cool,
like what you would see on a mountain bike, where it like kind of like clamps onto the spoke and just kind of like measures the tension like that, or
yeah. So it actually wraps around the spoke head, and so I've actually got one here. So it's a little that's the wrench head, and yeah, it wraps around the nipple, and then you click it into the wrench.
So it's like a torque wrench then.
Exactly.
So for people listening, it looks more like what a actual spoke wrench would look like, that you would be like tightening and loosening your spokes with. Except for it goes onto a torque wrench so that it kind of like clicks whenever they turn their spokes to a certain tension, whereas like on bike wheels, you're like measuring the actual tension on the spoke itself.
Exactly. Yep. And with the moto wheels, it just having a good even pull over throughout the entire wheel, it just maximizes the strength. And back in those days, that when they started the business in like 97, 98, when they were creating the product, at that point, wheel maintenance was uncharted territory. It wasn't at that point, nobody made a spoke wrench, and all the OEM call outs in the manuals were really, really low. And so for the most part, they've kind of helped write write that book on wheel maintenance.
So it would just like it was like a factory wheel, just like some machine would just spin them in there. And it was like, yeah, it's good enough. See you later. And that was how you got it.
Exactly. And then one thing too is like whenever you buy a brand new motorcycle, the wheel, it might be true, but it's not tight. Right. And so the first time you go ride it, the nipples are coming loose, and then the wheel starts getting square, and you end up chasing your tail pretty quick there. So it's nice to just have a tool that it takes the guesswork out of it, right? Like, all the spokes need to be at this torque, and you just go through, rip right through it, and you're done. It's, 2 minutes, 3 minutes for both wheels, and
100%. So, I mean, before that, basically what a guy would do is just go out there and kind of like from experience know, hey, this is about tight enough, and just, that would be that. And
and what they do, what most people do is they just tap on the spokes kind of and listen for certain harmonics, and it's like, that's not accurate.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
I would imagine that's probably all over the place. So they start this like just kind of like doing this stuff for themselves, and then they do this project. Then how does that become a business?
So they started with the spoke torque wrench, and at that point, like I said, they were fresh out of college and they were still working other jobs, and it was more for them. They were kind of like just fans of the sport, just kind of like starstruck that mechanics at the supercross and motocross races were using the wrenches. And
right. So they decided after they did this project, they were like, we should sell these things, basically.
Yeah. So Cole's younger brother was actually racing Supercross at the time. And so they were taking the spoke torque wrench and the brake kits. They were taking those products and then they would just go sell them at the Supercross races. They would try to get whatever teams to run them. And then, so that was kind of what jump-started it all.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So it's, once the spoke torque wrench came in, they started with the brake components, and then they went on to like anti-vibration inserts. They go in the end of your bar, kind of like external or internal bar weights. They just help minimize some vibration. And then the handlebar, our flex handlebar didn't actually come in until a little later. It didn't come in until I don't think it hit production until 2004. So it was
just because the engine's like idling, the handlebars are kind of like, obviously you're getting the kind of jiggling around from that. Is that what what they were trying to overcome, or actually overcome from the ground as well? At
that point, honestly, I think early on it was more kind of injury prevention. Cole's younger brother, he cased a jump racing Supercross and did some damage to his wrist. And so real early on, I think it was more for like injury prevention kind of thing. And then,
so those inserts, they were just, what would they be doing?
What's that?
You said they were like inserts in the handlebars. Like, what would they be doing?
Yeah. So it's basically, you think of like skateboard dodos, and I hate to describe them that way, but that's the easiest way for like people to, visualize them. So it was basically, they were using like a polyurethane elastomer. And it just isolates the handle from any metal to metal contact. So right off the get-go, it helps drastically with vibration. And then also, like if you come up short on a jump, the bar is working in the plane of the suspension. So if you have like a catastrophic overjump or a catastrophic overjump, the bar is going to minimize that a little bit, and just help hang on to the bike.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is like, for other people that maybe don't know skateboarding, like it's kind of like a rubber grommet, but it would just go inside of the bar, you're saying?
It actually goes, it is kind of outside, but it's basically where the handle is pressed into the center section there. There's a little elastomer, and we actually have a compression elastomer that's a larger one, and then a rebound elastomer. So the compression elastomer would be like if you're actually landing a jump, or if you're compressing the handlebars downward. The rebound elastomer would be like if you're trying to bunny hop the bike, right? It's kind of a feeling like that, where you're pulling up on the bar. That's where the rebound is noticeable.
So then but you're talking about the handlebars that you guys developed at that point, yeah?
Yeah.
No, but you said before that there was something that they had developed that just went inside, or something like it was like.
Oh yeah. The anti-vibration insert. Yeah, it's basically just a brass insert that slides inside the handlebar end.
And what does that do?
Just dampens the harmonics. Yeah,
so it's not loud.
What's that?
It's just like you said, the harmonics. So it's just not shaking as much or something, or?
Correct. Yeah. So think like, like a sport bike, like a sport motorcycle. They have those little external bar end weights. They have like that, on the outside of the grip, they have like an additional little hangout that's like 2 inches out.
Yeah.
So that's an external bar end weight. And basically ours is a similar concept, but just internal. So you can, on the motorcycle side, you can anchor hand guards to it. But yeah, it just helps minimize that high frequency vibration, like motor vibration or.
And I thought I had a couple of sport brakes. I always thought that was just like my frame sliders on the end of the bars there. I didn't even realize they were weights.
Yeah, there's something happening there for sure.
Yeah. Totally no idea there. That's pretty funny. Yeah. So, anyway, so you guys they start building this business. Obviously, things start taking off, and by the time you came to the company, you said it was like 2011. So they've been at it for about 10, 11 years at that point. How big was the company at that point?
It was starting to grow, but at that point it was still kind of, they were doing pretty well, but really the big issue for us was all of our stuff is 100% American made. And so the cost of production was pretty heavy there for a while. So yeah, it wasn't until we pulled production in-house that we were really able to start growing and kind of moving forward. But
at that point, they were still getting some local machine shop to machine their parts for them or whatever. And then
exactly. Yep. So they started out of Cole's parents' house. They were just in a shed in the backyard. And they were having a local machine shop machine all their stuff and assemble all their stuff.
Right.
And then just slowly over the years, they, bought a building in Utah and just kind of slowly pieced it all together. And so here in the last like 4 or 5 years, we finally, we've got a couple machines here. We've got a few mills and a few lathes, and pretty much everything is in house now, everything except for anodize. And so it's kind of nice to see that progression too, because when I came on board, when I started working for the company, we didn't have much control of production. Most of the machining was done was outsourced. We knew where it was happening and it was done in SoCal, but still we just didn't have great control over it.
Right.
And so that's
like super, like, is it like a lot of like skill that goes to that, or is it like something that's expensive? Because I got a buddy that runs a hub company, and he doesn't do his own anodizing either. He like sends it out to you.
Yeah, it's tough, man. And I always say, like, anodize here in the States is kind of a little bit watered down. Like, we've talked about doing our own anodize, but we'd have to do it in a separate facility just because EPA regulations, and for us at the end of the day, we don't do anodize. We make handlebars and motorcycle and mountain bike parts, and so we tossed the idea around of doing anodize in-house just to save ourselves the trouble, but maybe one day, but for right now, we're just bigger fish to fry kind of
EPA, so it's just like some like crazy chemicals that they're using or something like that.
Yeah, and actually here in the States, I think they're kind of restricted on some of that stuff. But still, it would require a separate facility. And by facility, we had just talked about doing like a shipping container in the back, and just doing it in there. But
that's a facility.
yeah, really. And so I don't know. We talked about it, but it's just maybe later on. But for now,
yeah, no, I hear you. I was just curious because it made me think. Like I said, my friend runs a hub company, and totally, definitely isn't doing it himself either. So I was wondering what it was to it. Anyway, so how long was it until you guys decided to get into the handlebar spot? Then you said that, I think you said Cole's brother like got into a crash or something like that, and that's kind of what spawned it, or?
Well, no. So he was racing Supercross, and that was kind of what started the moto handlebar, was a crash back then. And then throughout the years, we just made a bunch of moto handlebars and kind of put our focus there.
So how did that? So I was trying to stay on the moto side before we jump over to the MTB, but so then basically, like, you guys start selling these moto bars because I forget who it was that you said got injured, but and then the reception was like right away, or like did it take a while for that to kind of start taking off?
It took a little while just because they're so conceptually different. Like when you look at them, it's a different handlebar. So,
because moto bars are typically like one solid piece, like
correct.
Like ones are, right? Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Correct. And so whenever we brought that handlebar to the market, it was just a little bit different than what people were used to. But honestly, our biggest form of marketing has always been like word of mouth. Like once people ride with the bar, it's a totally different discussion. Yeah. And I'm kind of proof of that myself. That's one of the big reasons that I'm here is like I raced off-road at a pretty high level. I had a pretty bad elbow injury one year, and the guys here at Fasst Co reached out to me to run the handlebar. And I was like 18 years old, and I was kind of just ignorant, and I looked at the handlebar.
Everybody is at 18.
Yeah, and I looked at the handlebar, and I was like, no thanks, just kind of a knucklehead about it.
Yeah, that looks dumb. I'm over it.
Yeah, exactly. And later on that year, I ended up riding a bike at the 24 Hours of Glen Helen, and it had a set of flex bars on it. And every time I got off the bike, I was like, man, the front suspension on this thing feels really good. And everybody was just laughing. They're like, man, it's not the suspension, it's the handlebars. And for me, I was like, man, I refuse to believe that a handlebar makes that big of a difference, And so I ended up reaching back out to the guys here at Fasst Co, and I was like, hey, can we meet at Glen Helen? I want to do some testing on my own bike. And that was in 2010. So yeah, here I am 12 years later selling handlebars and, passionate about it.
Yeah. So definitely like it made that much of a difference to you right away.
For sure. And that's one thing that, as a high level racer, like there's very few products that make that big of a difference day in and day out. Yeah. And so for me, like when I found that, when I was riding with something that legitimately made a difference, a noticeable difference in my riding, it was like, okay, this I don't care how these look. Like they're going on all of my bikes first, and so, yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, once I started racing with them, really once you ride with them, it's a different discussion. And so, here I am.
So as far as the moto ones go, like you guys have different models of those as well, right?
Yep. Different bar bins. We have about 80 different bar bins. We say that we have
just like sweep, up sweep, back sweep kind of thing, or
yep, exactly. So it would be back sweep, height, and width. And so between those variations, we've got a bunch of different bar bins. We can pretty much accommodate anything under the sun, whether it's a snowmobile or a motorcycle or a quad or an adventure bike or we've got a handlebar for everything.
So how does it start going then? Like, what is it that makes you guys start looking at the MTB market?
Honestly, all of us were hybrid moto mountain bike guys. Like as kind of like as the mountain bike industry started to shift, like 2011-ish, 2012, and like just the geometry of the bikes was getting gnarlier. Somewhere along the line, all of us ended up separately picking up mountain bikes. And so all of us were hybrid moto mountain bike guys. And we'd go riding our mountain bikes, and after like 15, 20 minutes, we're shaking out our hands, and we're rubbing our palms. And it was like kind of like an aha moment, where we're sitting there and we're on a group ride with a couple of us, and it's like, dude, we know we can minimize this. We know we can help with this. And, I think that old saying is like necessity is the mother of invention, and that's kind of where it started for us. Like all of us were hybrid moto mountain bike guys. And anytime we rode our mountain bikes, it was odd that our hands were the debilitating factor. It's something that we're not necessarily used to. And, so it just, kind of naturally started there. And at that point, I wasn't living here in Utah. I was working offsite. I was still working for Fasst Company, but I was working in Southern California and going to school out there. And I was racing cross country mountain bikes. I had kind of transitioned from moto to mountain bike by that point. And I just started harping on the guys to make me a handlebar, because at that point I was riding probably 15 to 20 hours a week cross country, and my hands were just, my hands would hurt, and I knew we had something that could help with that. And
you're like, dude, this works for like a motorcycle that weighs hundreds of pounds. Like, why is it not going to work for my
and so that was in 2014. And I basically told the guys, I was like, just send me a handlebar and let's just see. And that the first proof of concept that they sent me was just, it's funny to look back on now, but man, that first proof of concept was atrocious. It looked like our motorcycle handlebar without crossbars. Like it was big and it was bulky. But as soon as I pointed downhill with that thing, it was like, okay, we're on to something. Like there's definitely something here. We've got to refine some things and, tidy up the design and figure out elastomers. I mean, there was a lot to do. It took us, that was in the summer of 2014, and we didn't release the handlebar until the fall of 2017. So it took us a couple years of really, kind of harping on the product, and just, we are our own biggest critics really at the end of the day, and it took a couple years of really getting that handlebar to where we wanted it before we could release it to the public. But
so as it is now, it's actually 5 separate pieces, right?
So
like it's technically go, and then kind of like 2 of the angle pieces, and let's just say 1 that goes through the stem, right?
So it's actually 3 separate pieces, 3 structural components. The handles are
only 2 quote unquote hinges on it. Let's just call it that for.
Yep. So the handles are pressed into what's called the dog leg, and that dog leg is what articulates. And then, so each side has a handle and a dog leg.
I like that name.
So each side has a handle and the dog leg, and then this intersection. And I'll kind of show you on here. So this basically is the dog leg here. This piece. This is actually what dictates the rise of the bar, the rise and the back sweep, right? So this is the back sweep. Right. So it's basically the dog leg here. The handle is pressed into it. And then this is what we call this whole thing is basically this intersection, but it's made up of a yoke, which controls some height as well. And then just the center tube, which is where your stem would clamp.
Interesting. So it takes you guys, would you say a year or 2 or something like that to kind of like get that all like dialed in, or
3.5 almost. It was a process. And really the biggest thing was, the biggest thing honestly was the elastomers. The feeling that you want out of an elastomer on a 250-pound motorcycle at 70 miles an hour is a much different feel than what you want out of an elastomer on a mountain bike that's 30 pounds going 30 miles an hour. Like,
right.
just
I would imagine you want something like tremendously softer than what you're using in the motorcycle. And
yeah, and the hard part on the mountain bike side was how, that window of what's acceptable on the mountain bike was much smaller. Like on the moto, the range of what's rideable and what's usable is a little broader, and on the mountain bike, it is a little smaller as far as rider weight. And you do have a little, I wouldn't say fewer options, but that the window of elastomer is a little tighter on that mountain bike bar than it is on the moto bar.
Do you have different elastomers for like somebody that's like a big rider compared to a skinny rider, or like so that, how do you determine that for when somebody's ordering it? Is it just they put in their weight or their ride style?
Yeah, we ship the bar with all the spare compression and rebound elastomers. And we ship it with a little info card that kind of has some direction and just gives you some basic direction on where you should be with elastomer setup, whether it's rider weight or skill level or what kind of bike you're on. There's a little info card that just kind of points you in the right direction of where you should be. And there is kind of I would say there is a little bit of a weight, rider weight there that has some, is kind of applicable to which elastomer you're going to pick.
Yeah. I would imagine, as well as like how you're riding. I mean, like, I would think somebody is doing a bunch of like smoother cross country stuff compared to somebody who's like just smashing some rocks. They're definitely going to maybe want something a little different, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the same would apply for a bar bend too. Like somebody who's riding, less aggressive trails, we'll say, somebody who's riding primarily cross country stuff and, riding more mellow stuff, just more, like 6-8 hour days on the bike, more, I guess I wouldn't say bike packing, but like XCO or XC stuff. Those guys tend to prefer a handlebar that has a little more back sweep. And then the guys that are riding like enduro or trail bikes, those guys prefer something a little straighter. Downhill bikes.
What do you think the reason is for that?
I think it's a little easier to keep your elbows up. Yeah, with a bar that has a lot of back sweep, it does kind of force your elbows into your lap. And the way we describe that on the moto side is like you just feel cramped. You don't feel like you have a lot of operating room. And then so naturally the instinct there is to start rolling your bar forward, and then your issues start stacking on themselves.
What's wrong with that?
So as you start rolling your bar forward, the back sweep starts turning into the rise of the handles. And then it's just kind of, then you're not really getting, if you're on a traditional handlebar, it's not hugely detrimental. I mean, at that point, you're not really getting the value of the bar bend for what it is. But on our handlebar, with the way our bar is articulating, if you roll that bar forward, you're not getting great performance out of it.
That makes sense there.
Yeah, if you roll
my buddy is always giving me a hard time about where I put my handlebars. Actually, I think I was introduced to you from Richard from Stickard.
Yep.
That's the guy I'm talking about. Every time we hang out, he's bitching at me because I roll my bars forward. But I always attribute the way that I roll my bars is that that's how I like the sweep. So it's like me adjusting the sweep. And I think for him, he thinks of it more as reach. Yep. So like, he's like, this reach is wrong for you. And I'm like, no, I feel fine like this, but I don't know. I guess if I was using your bars, I'd have to get it right.
And I think like on the mountain bike side, it's not, well, even with the traditional handlebar, it's not the end of the world. Like we see people roll the bar forward, and again, on a traditional handlebar, it's not the end of the world. But one thing we've learned over the years, just from talking to riders and, changing bar bends and playing around with different setups, usually if a rider is rolling their bar forward, it's a sensation of just not feeling, not having enough operating room. And then, as you mentioned, some guys will roll that bar forward and then they kind of just get accustomed to that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you can do the same with a slightly straighter bar and then keep it more neutral. You could do it with a
Yeah, I
longer
never think
stem.
about
You know,
that
there's a lot of stuff you could do on the mountain bike just to kind of play
either.
with ergos and bar position.
I tend to use a smaller frame than like I'm like on that like in between, you know.
Yeah.
I'm 6'2", so most companies say that I'm probably an extra large. But every time I ride an extra large, I don't really like it, and I usually end up going with a large. And I think that bar thing is probably partially to do with that, because I mean I have my seat like slammed back on the rails, and then I'm just like kind of opening up the cockpit just a little bit more like that. But I like the frame smaller because I just feel like I can throw it around better.
Yeah,
But
that would make sense as well, because that is something that we see on the moto side. Like if a guy is on a handlebar that has too much back sweep, they'll just literally start rolling that thing forward, you know? And yeah, it's.
So in the moto side, like weight, I would imagine doesn't really freaking matter, right?
No, I mean, there are some people that they'll mention it, but dude, on 250-pound motorcycle, I mean, we're running like 3 gallons of fuel. You know, we're running big fuel tanks and steering stabilizers and skid plates, and
and you got a motor, like with lots of horsepower.
Yeah, the amount of weight on a modern day motorcycle is just, it's like, man, and honestly, it's getting that way with mountain bikes, you know, and it's getting to the point where it's like, you know what, bikes are getting heavier and people just want to be comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you tackle that then with the MTB world? Because I don't think that, I mean, I would imagine your bars probably weigh fairly more than a regular bar. What's the weight look like?
Yeah. So our carbon bar is about 400 grams. So it's about 100 grams heavier than an equal width carbon bar. It is quite a bit heavier, but
what's 100 grams? I don't even know what 100 grams is.
So a spare tube, for perspective, a spare tube weighs like 200 grams. You know, I think that's a 27.5 tube as well.
So it says 100 grams is like 0.22 of a pound, so about a quarter of a pound.
Yeah, you're splitting hairs for sure, but you know, it wasn't super
tough. The difference in the weight is what you're saying is 100 grams.
Correct. Yep. Correct. Yeah. So and again, that's over an equal width bar. But I mean, the bar is a little bit heavier, but kind of how we've always approached that, even from the moto side, is performance based, right? Like you're gonna, you know, your hands are gonna hurt less at the end of a long day on the bike or consecutive days on the bike. Less fatigue in wrists, elbows, your neck. I mean, whenever you consider the performance benefits, it's a small penalty to pay for that added weight. You know, it's.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, with stuff like that, where it's making you more comfortable, a lot of times what you lose, let's say the performance that you lose in weight, you gain back more so in your body not being tired, which is like better stamina and better like overall kind of performance. Like for example, I read this thing about like they did these tests with like air pressure on road bikes, and it was, you know, these guys that are running like 100 or 125 psi, and then they had some people running 80, and it was like the people that were running 100 psi were like faster out the gate, but over time the people that were running the 80 psi were like less fatigued, so they ended up doing better overall. It was kind of weird, you know. Like,
yeah, that would make sense though. I mean, 100, you know, that'd be a 45 psi difference, and you know, think over the course of 6-8 hours on the bike, dude, that's definitely going to fatigue you more, and you're going to be a little less fiery, you know, at the end of a long day on the bike for sure. Like it. Yeah, that's, you know, like we always speak to the high frequency vibration or high frequency abuse, you know. So think like if you're riding in Moab or something, you know, and it's a bunch of like rock ledges, just consecutive rock ledges, something like that would be high frequency abuse. And, you know, that's really what causes a lot of the abuse, you know, longer hours on the bike. Like that high frequency stuff is really what causes that fatigue.
Just that chatter, that constant chatter.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I could see it over a day. Like I know, like when we're doing like shuttle days here locally, and I mean, you're just like smashing downhill and rocks, and you know, and it's pretty typical that, like exactly what you said, you know, when we get to the bottom of the hill, everybody's kind of like shaking their hands out, you know.
Yeah.
Or I even remember there was a run that I was doing just the other day, and I remember, or yesterday actually, when I was riding, and then we were doing this long downhill section, and it was like I came into a pedally spot, and I remember just taking like one hand at a time off the bars, just like stretching my hand, put it back on, doing the same thing with the other one, just so I could like get that like claw feeling going, you know?
Yeah, just some kind of relief.
Yeah. So I can see how it would be beneficial to, you know, what you guys are doing. So so how do you come up with the elastomers whenever, I mean, is it just like you look for this material and then you like reach out to whoever makes them and you're like, hey, I want them in this size? Or is there some way that you guys can like create them yourselves? Or when you were like figuring it out?
We have played around with making our own elastomers here in house, but the consistency in production is pretty tough.
Mm-hmm.
We make our foot peg elastomers, like we make a foot peg for the motorcycles.
Mm-hmm.
We do those elastomers in house, but the mountain bike elastomers are, like I said, they're a little more finicky, and so we just have we have a vendor in SoCal that does that for us. And one of the materials, or one of the reasons, or you know how we select the material that we use is what returns to its previous shape and its previous density as many times as possible. So for us, that's something that matters, you know, something that's going to last not only 6 months, not, you know, a couple years. Like we don't want people to be riding with these things for a few months and have elastomer issues. So, you know, like on the moto bar, we have guys that reach out and they've ridden with the bar for like 15 years and they're like, hey, do I need to do anything with this? And it's like, it's like, man, I mean, it wouldn't hurt to throw some new ones on there by any means, but you know, that's so, I mean, you could get, you know, you could get years out of those things, no issues. But I tell folks, you know, if you're getting a lot of seat time, change them every year, every 2 years, like just when the bike is sitting in the garage in the winter, just throw some new elastomers on there.
And what's the feeling that people, then it just starts like flexing too much?
Yeah. And I mean, it's
like play in it.
Yeah, it starts to kind of break in. I guess I would say start to flex a little too much. And it is a slow kind of, you know, it does happen over time. And so a lot of times it takes people takes people a little while to figure that out or kind of notice it. But yeah, more than anything, it's just kind of a slow, you know, breaking down of the elastomer.
Yeah. So, what about like how are they being held together? Because I mean, I would imagine people are afraid of like that would probably be one of the other questions that you get from people is like, how is this not going to fail on me? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I tell folks that just, you know, over the last 20 years of manufacturing motorcycle handlebars, like we've figured out what works, what's strong, what doesn't. And so when we, you know, scaled that down for our moto bar, when we scaled that down for our mountain bike bar, our mountain bike bar is really overbuilt for mountain bike standards. Like we joke around about it where you could literally drive a UPS truck over that thing and be fine. You know, it is legitimately overbuilt, you know, and we would rather it that way. That's how all of our stuff has always been. We don't want to have something out there that's, you know, not up to our standards or, and really at the end of the day, we don't want to be dealing with people having issues on our products, you know, so we're not going to release something that's not strong, that we wouldn't trust ourselves. And I think that's another good thing too, is we have so many good, capable riders here in house that, you know, before the public sees anything, we've got years and years of testing and development into a product. And so, yeah, so we have 2 bars. We have the carbon handlebar and the alloy handlebar. The carbon handlebar, the handles are pressed and bonded into that dog leg. On the alloy bar, it's pressed and roll pinned. So there's a roll pin on the bottom that's holding it all together. And it is pressed fit, but that roll pin is kind of just a safety measure. And then, yeah, like I said, I mean, they're, you know, 7076 T6 aluminum, titanium hardware. Like it's definitely a burly handlebar. And whenever you pick it up, when you pull it out of the box, that's immediately evident.
Yeah, you're like, man, this thing's kind of heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would imagine the other thing that you get people talking about every day of the week is how much it costs.
Yeah. Yeah, man, to do it and to do it right comes at a cost. That's for sure. Like I mean, each handlebar is, built by hand, individually inspected before they leave. Like there's a lot that goes into it, to say the very least.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just so people know, it's like $325, something like that.
Yeah. So the aluminum bar is $324.99. And then the carbon bar is $424.99. So it's $100 more expensive, and it's 100 grams lighter. The carbon bar is, but
I see.
Like I said, the alloy bar, it's bulletproof. I mean, if you were a cross country guy that's going to be racing cross country forever, the carbon bar is probably the best way to go. But otherwise, the alloy bar is perfect. I mean, for modern day e-bikes and trail bikes, and the trail bike that I'm riding right now is like 35 pounds. So an extra 100 grams, I'm not worried about it.
Yeah. So the 100 grams, that when you were saying it's 100 gram difference, that was for the alloy?
Yeah, but it is 100 grams heavier than an equal width carbon or equal width alloy bar. Our carbon bar is.
The carbon is still okay.
Correct. Yep. Yeah.
All right. Right on.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, like, this could very well be a handlebar that you don't like get rid of. You know what I mean? Like, you get a new bike, you would keep your handlebar, you'd throw the stock one back on. So it's like,
yeah. And that's
if I was going to go buy like a M9 NV bar, those are like almost $200.
Exactly. That's kind of how it is on the moto side. Like I said a minute ago, we have guys that have a handlebar for 10, 15, 20 years. And I mean, yeah, obviously, like, if you have a catastrophic crash or something on the moto, like things can happen, products fail, but, or they can be damaged. They don't fail. But, I mean, yeah, like the goal is for you to have this on your bar for years and years to come. And that was kind of the thought behind our alloy bar is it just really, like with our carbon bar, the only issues that we ever had with our carbon bar was people over tightening the controls and crushing the carbon, just literally not paying attention to the carbon torque specs and just over tightening the brake controls and crushing the carbon. And so it was like, all right, let's offer that alloy bar just to have it. And it takes that, out of the equation. So, yeah, like I said, I mean, the alloy bar is
with the carbon one, is everything carbon, or is it just like
just the handles? Just the handles are carbon.
Right. So you guys could probably bring the weight down if you built the whole thing out of carbon then.
Yeah, we've tried and we've looked at some ways of doing it, but yeah, cost.
Yeah. Yeah, you're like, they're already pissed about 400. What happens if we bring it back to 650?
Yeah. But again, the cool thing is, like, with our moto bar, same thing with the mountain bike bar. Once people ride with it, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this makes sense. Like, why didn't I get this sooner? Why didn't I try this sooner?
Yeah. No, it's definitely an interesting idea. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it totally makes sense, as long as it doesn't, like, I would imagine that most people are just worried about the flex. But
yeah. And that's one thing too, like when people look at the handlebar and they're like, oh, I don't know if I want my handlebars to move. And it's like, yeah, I agree. But if you do it in a natural motion or a consistent plane, if you do it right, there's some benefits, no doubt about it. And so, yeah, with our handlebar, like, that's
really hard to, I mean, can you like really notice, like, right out the gate? Like, can you feel it, like, that it's moving, or is it just more like everything feels better?
Yeah, exactly. So it's honestly more in the things that you don't notice than noticing the handlebar move. And that's one thing, like, it's kind of a catch-22 whenever people ask us, well, do you feel the handlebar move? And it's like, not in the fact of actually feeling the handlebar move like a noodle in your hands, but you feel less abuse at the hands by the end of a ride. And then
somebody was mentioning Rev Grips in the comments earlier, and I don't know, are you familiar with them?
Oh yeah, I've ridden with them. Yep.
Yeah, and I got a set of them, and I don't know, maybe I'm just not super observant, but I didn't really notice that they were moving. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
obviously they got the thing in there, they were moving, but that was not, like, at the end of the day, my hands were tired from my handlebars smashing my freaking hands all day,
Yeah.
more than I was like, oh man, my grips feel loose. Like,
Yeah.
I definitely didn't feel that way, because like any grip that I don't know, most grips you grab, they have a little give to them, like in the rubber when you're moving your hand. So,
Yeah.
or your gloves slipping a little bit, you know what I mean? So
Exactly.
I don't know, maybe it's just me. I had one of my buddies that used to always get all like weird about the ODI clamps. He's like, on certain grips, they would like, he'd be like, oh, I can feel my grip like moving. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, dude.
Yeah. But yeah, it's usually for people whenever they switch back to a traditional handlebar, that's kind of the eye-opening experience. Like when they switch back to a rigid bar, it's like, oof, okay, this is harsh. Like that's when you notice the difference.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know that's usually what it takes for me. Like,
Yeah.
I ride something for a while and then I give it back, or I take it off my bike, or I get my other bike on my other bike, and then all of a sudden it's like blatantly obvious. I would say I use pedaling innovation pedals. They're kind of like a little bit bigger platform. And that's exactly what happened to me there. It was like I had regular flats on one bike and then those on the other one. And I don't know what happened. Like my other bike was broken or something like that. It was at the shop, and I didn't ride it for like a month. And then when I got it back and I got on the regular flat pedals again, I was like, oh, I'm not doing this again after this ride.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, what's the warranty look like?
So as far as like advertised warranty, I think we do like 5-year dealer or 5-year manufacturer and 2-year crash damage. But I tell folks, like, we're all riders and racers here, so we operate on the basis of doing the right thing. So if you have an issue, reach out 100%. Like all of us, literally everybody here rides and races at a pretty decent level.
Right.
And so, yeah, we tell folks, if you have an issue, even if it's outside of that window, give us a call. Absolutely.
Yeah. What's the crash replacement look like?
We do 50% crash damage replacement.
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so how's that process work for people then? They just like send you a picture or something like that, or?
Exactly. Yeah. Most of the times people will call in and then we just have them email us a photo. Usually, honestly, like the crash damage stuff we see is not crash damage. It's more like bikes falling off the bike racks on the freeway and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's
left it on the roof rack and forgot about it, drove through the garage.
Exactly. Like it's pretty hard to damage one of these in a crash. So usually what we've seen so far is more like I just dealt with a carbon handlebar that fell off a bike rack last week, so that's more what we see than anything with the warranty stuff.
So I got a guy here in the comments that's asking how the bars interact with the suspension fork. So
that's a great question. So they're actually designed to complement the feel of a front fork or a suspension fork. Like I mentioned earlier, with that bar being positioned as close to neutral as possible, that's what I mean when I say neutral. Like we want the bar as close to the plane of the fork as you can comfortably get it. And then really that's kind of what the bar is doing, is just complementing the feel of that front suspension. The cool thing there is then it allows you to tune the fork differently. Then you can set the fork up. You can set the compression up a little stiffer. And then you can rely on the handlebar to pick up high frequency stuff like rocks and roots and some of that stuff that you would traditionally tune a fork for.
So you're saying that way when the movement of the handlebar, whatever minute amount of movement that it has, then that's moving in the exact same direction of your fork when it's compressing.
Correct. Yep. And that's one thing too, like people are like, when they look at the bar, it's like, oh, I don't know if I want my handlebar to move. But because it's moving in the same plane as your fork, because it's working with the fork, it's really not moving that much on the trail. Like it's maybe 1 or 2 millimeters at a time. Like they're at the bar end. Like it's not a lot of movement. If you were to have like a big over jump to where you fully bottomed out that fork, then the bar would start to engage quite a bit more. But because the bar is working with that fork, you're not going to get a ton of movement out of the handlebar unless you bottom that fork.
So typically it's only moving about 1 millimeter, you said?
I would say probably, between 1 to 3, depending on the elastomer setup you have and what riding you're doing. You can obviously get it to move quite a bit more. Like on my cross country bike, I have it set up super soft. My cross country bike is more like a gravel grinder, I just more trying to minimize like washboard dirt road. You know, I'm not riding anything aggressive on that. And on that bike, I've got a really narrow handlebar and I've got a soft elastomer on there. And, you know, if I'm sitting in the garage and I'm cranking on that thing and trying to push all my weight through it, I could probably get the elastomer, or I could get the bar to move probably, you know, 6 to 10 millimeters at the bar end. But again, on the bike, on the trail, that's not how it's going to work. You know, it's going to be more subtle, you know, 2 to 3 millimeters at a time, just taking that harsh edge off.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when you order the bars, then are you ordering, like, do you just order them at like 825 and you cut them yourself, or how does that work? You have to order them to size, or?
So we have 2 widths. We have a downhill bar that's 810, and then the rest of our bars are 800. So we have 3 bars. We have an enduro bar, an e-bike bar, and then a downhill bar. And the enduro bar and the e-bike bar, they're both 800 millimeters wide, and then the downhill bar is 810.
Okay. But then as far as like the material in them or the elastomers, like all the stuff's the same.
Same, yep.
So it's really just the size of the bar is what you're looking at.
Yep. The width for that downhill bar is actually a wider center section for a direct mount stem.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I would assume they're like 35 millimeter then.
Nope. So 31.8 still. We have talked about doing a 31 or a 35 mil stem. Or a 35 mil bar. We've talked about doing our own stem as well, but for us, because we have the characteristic of the bar built into the design, if we went to a 35 millimeter clamp area, we would just add weight. You know, and so for us, we worked really hard to keep that weight reasonable. And so, yeah, if we went with that 35 millimeter clamp area, it's just going to add weight. And so it's like, well, again, a bit of a catch-22. I mean, eventually I think we will, just because, you know, most bikes are coming stock with 35 mil stems now. So I think eventually we probably will do a 35 mil bar. We're just being stubborn about it.
Do you think you could achieve the same thing if you did like some kind of 2-piece stem instead of doing it with the handlebars?
I'm actually not sure. I think it would be hard to get controlled movement with the stem. There's some companies on the moto industry that are doing similar concept with the stem.
Oh, okay.
What they're doing is they're using an elastomer to wrap around the handlebar, basically. So it's kind of hard to describe, but basically think of just sliding an elastomer onto the center of your handlebar and then clamping that in the stem. So the downside of that is that whenever you wrap the handlebar in that stem, or whenever you wrap that handlebar in the elastomer, you're steering through that elastomer before the bike starts to react, right?
So it's flexing that way too. Yeah.
Correct. So there's some, you know, and that's one thing that one of the big, I guess, advantages of the flex bar is that it's, in engineering terms, it's minimizing abuse in the load path of the suspension, and it's precise in the steer path. So you're never steering through any of that abuse reduction. You're never steering through any wonky movement. It's just as precise as a traditional handlebar in that steer path. And that kind of comes back to our philosophy. Like, we've always, from the moto, you know, early on in the moto days, like, we've always said we're not willing to sacrifice control for the sake of abuse reduction. You know, and it comes back to us being riders and racers ourselves. Like, you know, like for like our foot peg, for example, on our moto foot peg, we tried playing around with softer elastomers on that, and that it's basically a 3-piece foot peg. It's a base, it's a flat elastomer, and then a cleat on top of that. And we played around with softer elastomers, but the downside was with those softer elastomers, that top platform of the peg would get a weird fore-aft roll under harsh braking. And so for us, that was kind of like where we just drew the line. You know, like we want all of our products to feel as much like a traditional as possible, just less abuse at the end of the day, you know? So same with our foot peg, our handlebar, all of that stuff. We want it to feel as much like a traditional handlebar as possible, but when you get done riding at the end of the day, you shouldn't be shaking out your hands.
So you guys have a pretty big line of moto stuff that you sell.
Yeah.
What do you think that you're like this is it for the mountain bike stuff, or do you guys think that you're going to look at doing other stuff? Or
we've got a lot of stuff in the pipeline. We got a lot of stuff going on. We've actually talked about doing we've actually talked about doing a gravel bar, like a drop bar with kind of our design in it. But again, with that, I think the big issue would be cost. I don't think people would be willing to pay that much for a drop handlebar that has that technology in it, but maybe. But we've got some hand guards, and
I think you put the price high enough, then people just want to buy it because it's expensive, right?
Literally, yeah, some of those guys, man. But yeah, I mean, we've got like hand guards, and we've got other little knickknacks here and there. But yeah, I mean, as far as mountain bike stuff, we really want to get the mountain bike bar figured out. That's kind of our focus at the meantime, and then we'll kind of pick up the pieces from there. I do think we're going to do a stem here pretty quick though, just because you got to put your handlebar in a stem. So I think we're going to do a stem and then just have one-stop shop where we still sell stems for really cheap.
I would feel like doing a stem too is like, I mean, if you're already machining parts and stuff like that, it's not. I don't feel like it's like overly complicated to make a stem. You know what I mean? It's like a piece of metal and you freaking cut it into whatever shape you want, right?
Yeah. For us, the only issue is machine time. Like we don't have, not that we don't have enough machines, but yeah, for all the products we have and everything we have going on, machine time is kind of what we're waiting on for that.
Well, yeah, and those machines aren't cheap either, man. So that's for sure.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, I asked earlier about the width of the bars. So as far as like people cutting them to their own size, like there's no void in the warranty or anything like that.
No, heck no, absolutely not. Yeah, cut those suckers. Yeah, make yourself comfortable. No issues there.
Yeah, and then as far as like however you would normally cut a like carbon bar or alloy bar or whatever, it's no difference there.
Yeah. So they come with instructions on how to cut the carbon. We just recommend like a 32 tooth blade to get through the carbon pretty quick. So yeah, nothing too crazy.
Gotcha. Right on, man. What do people say? What are the like? What's the most common feedback that you get on them?
Goodness, I mean, I guess it depends what kind of riding they're doing. Like we get a lot of guys, like a lot of the aggressive riders that don't expect much out of them. Like high level enduro or downhill guys that just, they see them and just don't expect them to really work well. Yeah. And then those guys are like, jumping to flats, or like, I would say that crowd, that downhill enduro crowd, those guys that are a little more hesitant, and then they find themselves charging harder or doing more runs, more consecutive days, stuff like that is the most consistent feedback, I'd say. Like we had a big group go to Whistler last year, and that was one thing. Like half the guys were on our handlebar and half of them weren't, and so that was kind of the joke amongst the group is, the guys that had our handlebar were just having fun, like they were ready for more runs, and the rest of the guys weren't. So I'd say that's the more common feedback that we get is guys are like, man, I just, I feel like I'm ready for more runs at the end of the day.
Yeah. Do you guys have any kind of plans to go somewhere like a Sedona where people could try them, or Sea Otter or something like that? Or do you guys already go to events? Or
so we've actually we did quite a few. We did Moab Outer Bike for a couple years, and then we did Sedona Mountain Bike Festival for a couple years. We haven't done any events since COVID, and not because the events haven't come back yet. They brought Sedona Mountain Bike Festival back last fall, but it was kind of last second. And we're more used to Sedona in the spring. So we weren't really ready for that. But
so we have be there next week.
No, we have the Hurricane Mountain Bike Festival coming up the road in Hurricane in like 3 weeks. So we have Hurricane Mountain Bike Festival this year, and then we're doing Moab Outer Bike, and then we're doing Bentonville Outer Bike.
Oh, okay. When's the Bentonville one?
The end of October.
How's Outer Bike work? Is that like a demo thing too?
Yeah. Yep. It's just basically a big demo event, and you sign up beforehand. I imagine it's exactly like the Sedona in terms of how it operates on the back end. You basically just sign up. Yeah, you just sign up, and then you put a card, an ID into your file, and then you just rent bikes.
Yeah, I haven't been to one of the Outer Bike things before, so I'd like to go check one of those out because that one in Utah, right?
Yeah, Moab.
Yeah. That wouldn't be too much of a drive for me to get to. So
Where you're in NorCal, right?
Yeah, Sacramento. So
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I guess I could fly out there somewhere, but I mean, even who knows?
It's rad, man. It's a cool event.
Yeah. How long is it? A couple days or something? Or
yeah, Friday to Sunday.
Okay, so it's just like Sedona, basically. They got like music and beer and stuff there too, and all that,
Yep.
or is it like just the
Same
demos?
same exact thing. Yep.
Right.
Beer tent and food and shuttles and all kinds of stuff. They're fun. I like them.
Huh. I'll have to check that one out, man. That definitely. I've been meaning to go ride the Moab area, and I just haven't. You know how it's like you get like so many weekends in the summer or whatever, and for us around here, it's kind of like in winter when there's snow in Tahoe, you're riding all your local stuff and the stuff that you're like that's too hot in the summer. And then as soon as like Tahoe starts melting, like then you're trying to get all that high altitude riding in. You throw in one or two trips and you're like, man, they're one year again,
Yeah, out of time. I know, and that's like, for us, pretty much the only time we get to Moab is for that outer bike. And so it's kind of a blessing and a curse. Like it's fun, but you don't get a ton of time to ride. At least for us as vendors, we're kind of limited. We show up a day before and get in a little riding, but
I always feel bad for the guys when I'm in Sedona because they're like, yeah, we're here, it's awesome, but like, I'm too tired to do anything else,
Yeah, dude. And that's the first time we did outer bike. We stayed afterwards to do some riding, and then after a couple days of the festival, nobody had the energy to ride. It was like, let's just get home.
Yeah, right. You're just over it. You're like, let's go. Let's beat it. Yeah, that's funny. So you said you guys are in like close to St. George?
Yep.
There's some pretty gnarly riding down there, huh?
There's a ton of it, man. It's a lot like Moab. There's a ton of riding out here. Big variety of riding too. There's a lot of good stuff out here.
I think what I saw on like from videos and stuff like that, it's not as much like exposure as there is in Moab though, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
There are some areas where you can
because I fucking am afraid of heights, so I don't want to do that.
Dude, I'm right there with you. There is some areas where you can get sketchy and you can get yourself uncomfortable, but not for me. I'll watch.
Yeah, I hear you there. So is there like a real big ATV scene there as well? And
oh heck yeah. And that that wasn't necessarily why they moved the business out here. It was just more kind of the business climate at the time. But this is a massive area for side-by-sides and motorcycles and quads, and it's a lot like Moab, like just a huge tourist attraction.
Yeah. I haven't been down in that area. I almost bought a bike from somebody in that area like a year or two ago. And I was kind of like really excited about it because I was like, this is an excuse for me to go down there and ride,
Yeah.
But it ended up not panning out. So
that's dude, there's so much riding here. You need like a week to see it all. You need a week to see the good stuff. Like I have a buddy that comes out here every couple of years and he spends a week and he rides like 2 or 3 trails a day. And he's just, it's kind of how you have to do it to hit all the good stuff.
Is everything there like all like legit, or is there like a bunch of poachy stuff, or how?
There is a bit of both. There is some poachy stuff, but I'd say mostly legit, but there is some poachy stuff here and there. Like out in Virgin, out by the Rampage sites, there's a bunch of poached stuff out there.
So is it poached just because it's like private property or something like that, or because it's not like you're hiding in the woods like we are,
Yeah, I would say I honestly, I think it's private property and they just don't get the okay to build.
Right. Okay.
Because they'll go to like those Rampage sites, for Rampage, and then whenever they leave, the local kids just spend like the next 6 months out there just digging and building, and so I don't know if they have the okay to dig out there, but it doesn't seem like they have an issue.
Does Rampage like clean that? Like, do they like? They don't break that stuff up when they leave. They just leave it, right?
Yeah, that's the crazy thing, dude. It's like the kids that we have growing up out here are like just not human, because they're,
Right.
you know, they grew up riding the Rampage side at like 16, 17 years old, you know, and they're just
throwing themselves off of cliffs and shit.
It's wild, dude. Myself and Chris, one of the owners of Fasst Company, Chris is actually still the head coach of a mountain bike team out here, a high school mountain bike team. And for a couple of years, I helped him with it. And it's tough because like the NICA rule, you know, the NICA, they hammer that rule, keep your wheels on the ground. But all of the kids out here, dude, like they get done riding in practice and then they go to the Rampage site and they're throwing backflips on their trail bikes.
Yeah.
You know, and so like, it's tough to tell those kids to keep their wheels on the ground, you know, like if you take those kids to a cross country practice and you tell them keep the wheels on the ground, like you're robbing the fun out of it, you know? And so it's kind of tough because some of those kids were like, hey dude, just keep it mellow. Don't be jumping stuff, just wheels on the ground. And then, you know, you see them that afternoon doing backflips at the Rampage site and you're like, dude, what are you doing?
That's funny.
Yeah.
So I want to ask too, why is the company called Fasst?
Good question, man. I don't have a great answer for that. That's one of the few things that I don't have a great answer for.
Yeah, no, it's all right.
Yeah.
They just came up with it. I wasn't sure, like there was like some kind of inside story to it or something like that. So.
Yeah.
No,
nothing. No story. Nothing cool. At least
you guys just make something up, man. I don't know. What do you think that, you know, that we haven't talked about that you would like people to know about the product?
Honestly, I think two big things. I think one, the performance, and two, the craftsmanship. You know, because like you spoke to earlier, like a lot of people look at the bar and they're like, oh, you know, I feel like that's going to break off in my hands. And it could not be further from the truth. You know, like I said, I mean, aside from the fact that we have a bunch of really capable dudes working here that put this thing through through its paces. Aside from that, I mean, we spent 20 years developing, or, you know, we have 20 years into a motorcycle handlebar now. So, you know, like quite literally our mountain bike bar is a scaled down version of the moto bar. That thing is way overbuilt. So on the craftsmanship side of it, you know, that's part of the American made thing. Like I said, all of our handlebars are built by hand, individually inspected. You know, I think there's something like 13 or 14 machine parts into this handlebar. So there's a lot that goes into it. And I tell folks, you know, like you spoke to the price earlier, to do it and to do it right comes at a cost. You know, if we were building these things for, you know, if we were pressing these things out in, you know, some other country for $15, $20 or whatever it was, I mean, it just wouldn't be the quality and durable product people expect from us, you know. And the same thing from our moto bar. If we were having this thing built somewhere else, it just wouldn't be up to our standards and wouldn't be what people expect from us. So the two
from all the experience with the moto stuff, I mean, that's the thing that in my eyes, like, should give somebody some like peace of mind. Like if you guys just came out with this bar last year and it was like, yeah, well, me and my buddies, we've been riding it, you know, like it would definitely be like less, like it wouldn't have as much clout, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like the idea of it handling what you could throw at it with an ATV or a moto, you know, like that's way more abuse than my mountain bike's gonna get, you know.
Correct. Yeah, but not only that, but
I guess you could argue too, well, there's so much more suspension in them, maybe they feel less. I don't know, you know.
Yeah, the one thing though that I would say the really abusive part of moto and ATV stuff is whenever they crash. You know, it's a 300, you know, 250, 300 pound machine coming toppling over on that handlebar, you know. And like I said, we have a surprising amount of people that run a handlebar for 10, 15 years, you know. So that's we just, you know, we don't want a handlebar that people can't trust. People can't you know, have for year in and year out. And just, you know, I think a big thing is the trust side of it. Like we want people to know that it's going to stay together.
Well, that's right. It's American made too. I mean, so like that's pretty cool.
Actually, our mountain bike bar is 100% made in Utah.
Oh yeah. All right. On.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw you guys had a little American flag on there or something like that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. All of our stuff does, man. Everything. Yeah. All of our products have a little American flag somewhere on it.
That's rad, man.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to like just sit here and go on and on about the same kind of questions over and over again. So I feel like we've covered everything unless there's
Yeah.
something. But I do like to ask people at the end, do you watch YouTube?
Oh yeah.
I always ask people, and it doesn't matter if it's like a mountain biking channel or not, like what YouTube channels they watch, because it's fun to like come up with some like maybe you learn about some new channel. There was a guy once that was on the show told me about this guy named that does like it's called Cart Narcs. And he
Yeah.
just like freaking hassles people in the parking lot about not putting their carts back in the like little buggy cage.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
hilarious. It's fucking hilarious.
That's my guy. I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So what do you like to watch?
Dude, so I'm a bit of a nerd for this channel. It's called Matt's Off-Road Recovery.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know what
Yeah.
you're talking about.
So they're based out of here in St. George. They're like right up the road from us. And so
Yeah.
we'll be out on moto rides sometimes and we'll see those guys on a recovery, you know? And so, and their YouTube channel is massive. And
there's a pretty big mountain bike YouTuber called BCPOV who actually got his Sprinter stuck out there and just so happened to have Matt's Off-Road Recovery show up to pull him out.
No way.
Yeah, it's pretty
That
crazy.
is rad. It's small world.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's the current one. Like I don't watch a lot of TV or a lot of YouTube, but that's the one that like Wednesday, whenever they release new episodes, I'm on it.
Right on, man. Well, like I said, or if I don't even know if I did say, I really do appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah,
it was really fun talking about your product, and and hopefully I'll be able to make it to one of these fests that you guys are going to and give it a shot. Put them to the test, see how they feel. So
I appreciate you having me on, and it was good chatting with you.
Yeah, it's definitely a good time. Anybody that hasn't had the chance to hit the thumbs up button, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that button for me. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. If you want to go check out the website, it's fasstco.com, and you can see all their moto stuff. You can see all their MTB stuff over there. Check them out. It's in the show more. If you're on the website, your podcast app should have that link down there as well. Let's go ahead and click it. Go over there and check it out. I want you guys to remember one thing though. It only takes a bike to be a biker. Get out and be